Good afternoon, students. My name is Ms. Yuna Kario, and I am your tutor for the subject of DPP LDL for the students that are doing a DJP and DJP students only. So this is welcome to the DPP DJP LDL. These slides are meant for your exam preparation for the year 2018. So we've incorporated all the 3 exams that will be written for the academic year of 2018. That is the May exams, the August exams, and the November exams. I'm going to go through all the slides. I think I've got about 5 slides with me here. And I will not specifically talk about what will be in which exam. I'll just briefly explain the topics that you should concentrate on as you prepare for your exams for this academic year. The way I've prepared these slides, I put them according to chapters. So, for example, I have chapter 1. In this chapter 1, I've incorporated every topic that will be included, and this is now for all the 3 exams. I hope you get that. Okay, let's talk about the exams in general. Your examination paper is out of 120 marks. You should answer all questions. There's no option of answering some questions or not all the questions. You have to answer all the questions. The study guide that you have to use to prepare for this exam, of course, is your study guide that you are provided with for the subject LDL. Okay, let's look on to chapter 1. Under chapter 1, the topics that will be included in the 2018 exams, we have the prenatal development of a human being. So what do we mean by prenatal development of a human being? In this case, we are looking at development in general. As you are tackling this question, you are expected to first of all describe what is meant by development. For example, we say the development of human beings describes the growth of humans throughout the lifespan, from conception all up to death. But now, because here we are talking about prenatal, we want you to pay specific attention to what happens during the prenatal stage of development. And then we have the topic of the cognitive development features of antenatal stage. In this case, you concentrate on the development of human beings at the antenatal stage. You also have to prepare for the subtopic of learning environment and a learning theory. A distinction should be made by what is meant by a learning theory and what is a learning environment in terms of learning, when learning takes place. Okay, and we also I'll just quickly go through these things: the oral, the fine, and the gross motor development during the toddler years. Please, you need to describe, for example, with the gross motor skills. First of all, describe what does the gross motor skill refer to. For example, here we are saying gross motor skills refer to the large muscles of the arms, the legs, and the torso. And the primary gross motor task during this stage is learning to walk independently and master balance. So when we talk about a toddler who is going through the gross motor development stage, what happens during this stage? And here we are told that this is now when a child is learning to walk independently and master balance. This is part of the gross motor development stage that children go through during the toddler years of their development. So you are expected to actually describe what happens in all these skills. That is now your oral skills, your fine motor skills, and your gross motor development skills. And of course, the use of examples in your description will earn you more marks. The cognitive development features of the development. In here, we are talking about the brain development of children. Under the topic of cognitive development, please read more on that, prepare well, and of course, the use of examples will assist you in answering this question as well. This is basically what I have in chapter 1. I'll move on to chapter 2. In chapter 2, we will look at the symptoms of physical abuse or physically abused children, or the symptoms that a child has gone through physical abuse. Of course, there are several different types of abuse. Some children go through sexual abuse, some go through emotional abuse. But in this case here, you as a teacher in your classroom, we are asking you to look at, what will you look at if you have to identify a child is going through physical abuse in the home, and that child is sitting in your classroom? What symptoms should you look for in such a child that is being abused physically? It might be at home, or it might be in the school environment by other learners, or it could be due to the issue of bullies in the school. So what should you look out for when you are looking at a child who's going through a physical abuse? You are supposed to identify this as a teacher. And the next bulletin there is the humanistic theory of motivation and the drive theory of motivation. When you are tackling the issue of motivation, first of all, before you go into detail about what is humanistic theory and what is the drive theory of motivation, first of all, of course, we need to know what is theory. What is motivation? What is motivation? What do you mean when a learner is motivated, and what does a teacher have to do in the classroom, in the learning environment, to motivate the learners it could be in the learning learning environment, during an assessment? What should a teacher do to motivate these learners? And once you have given a brief description what we mean by motivation, of course, in this case, depending on what the question asks, in this case, we are concentrating on the humanistic theory and the drive theory of motivation. Please, we need to know what does the humanistic theory of motivation mean, and what does the drive theory of motivation mean, and how do they differ from each other, and give relevant examples as part of motivation. And of course, we can also look at the disadvantages that might come with these types of motivation. The next bulletin there, we have the Montessori method of education. When we are tackling this in the exam setting, the Montessori theory, it's not really necessary that we need to know who came up with the theory and who was the name of the person. That is not important. We just need to know the method itself. How does the method of Montessori work in education? Because here we want you to explain how does the Montessori method of education work in the teaching and learning environment. The next point there is the nutrition's impact on cognitive development in infants. Please, once you are given a question, you should actually read the entire question or the entire instruction, so you know when you see the issue cognitive development, and it says here in infants, so emphasis should also be put on infants. Here we are talking about infants, we are not talking about adults, we are not talking about toddlers, we are talking actually about infants. So please, you concentrate on the issue of infants, and here we are talking about the issue of nutrition, on the impact of cognitive development. How does good nutrition assist cognitive development? How does a child develop cognitively well if they have got good nutrition? And the learners that are not, or the children, because we are talking about infants in this case, the children or the infants that are not having access or given proper nutrition, how does that affect their development cognitively? We need to explain that, and of course give an example of what might happen when an infant is not given adequate nutrition. How does it affect them cognitively? The issue of classical and operant conditioning is one of the theories that we talk about in education. Classical and operant conditioning, we talk about these issues. Please, you as a teacher in the making, you should be able to classify in detail what is meant by classical and what's meant by operant conditioning as a learning theory. How do learners learn in the classical learning theory, and how do learners learn during the operant conditioning theory? Please, you need to do that a description clearly. You are also excited to give a comparison of Piaget's theory of cognitive development of learning to that of Bandura's theory of social learning. We know that Bandura's theory of social learning differs quite significantly with that of Piaget's theory of cognitive learning, because here Piaget talks about cognitive theory of learning, which involves the brain and the thinking of the mind, whereas Bandura's theory is mostly on social learning, that people as human beings, we learn more from our social environment. Our learning is mostly influenced by the environment in which we are growing, in the experience that we go through as human beings, whereas Piaget puts more of learning on the brain, on your innate abilities, what you are born with. So please do that comparison, and please give examples that are mostly learning theory examples. We would want your examples to be more focused on the learning teaching environment, what happens in the classroom. Of course, that is the examples that you wanted to give. Of course, when you are explaining your explanations using examples, you are able to earn more marks. And then we come to the I'm still with chapter 2. We have got the genetic problems that may affect children's development abilities. Genetic problems. When you talk about genetics, these are things that you have inherited, trends that you have inherited from your parents. These are your genes. So how do people's genes affect children's development abilities? In this case, we are talking about problems in genes. Someone might have inherited a problematic issue from one of the parents or both of the parents, and this might affect a child's development. So here you would go into detail. I'm sure in your modules you'll find more of these examples given in how this affects children's development abilities. It may be in the way they learn how to grasp information, how they tackle new information, how they develop emotionally, how they develop psychologically, and all that. So please go through this also and prepare well for your exams. And then we got the neurological impact on the emotional development of children. Unlike the genetic problems, here we are talking about the neurology as an impact on the emotional development of children. Please underline the word emotional. It's not development in general. Here, please focus your attention on the issue of the emotional development of a child. Of course, we know that children have got different ways of developing emotionally. Children might be of the same age. Some children tend to be more emotionally developed than some children of their counterparts of the same age. So we also look at many issues that might lead to these differences in children, in cases of how some children are emotionally developed than others. And then we look at, so in this case, we are looking at the neurological impact of this emotional development in children. That is the end of chapter 2. Now we look on to chapter 3. Immunization and what is the importance of immunization. In this case, your modules. Before I continue with chapter 3, I do receive several calls from some of the students, because they say, they call me and they tell me that immunization is not in chapter 3, or some say it's not in chapter 3, it's in chapter 4. Really, if your immunization topic is not in chapter 3, you find it in chapter 4, that really should not be a problem. The issue here, you should focus on what the topics I've mentioned here. Your focus should not really be on the chapter. So it might differ from the module you have, but in most cases, the topics that I'm bringing to you in the exams, they are all the same. They might differ in the chapter with the chapter in which they fall in your study guide, and unfortunately I'm only using the study guide that I'm provided with. So with my study guide I'm having, the topic of immunization is in chapter 3. So if it's in chapter 4 in the guide that we have, please just go to chapter 4 and prepare for the exams. But what is important here is to note that the issue of immunization will be in the exams. That is my point. So going back to chapter 3 now, here we will look at the importance of immunization. Why should children be immunized? Not only should we know that what is immunization, but we should also know why should we immunize children. Is it really important? Because we do have some parents who opt not to immunize their children. So as a teacher, especially a pre-primary teacher yourself, the issue of immunization is very important, because we are dealing with illnesses like meningitis, like measles, and such things that might affect children. So if the children are not immunized against this disease, and the issue of treatment and complication that might arise when the kids are not immunized, please discuss the importance of immunization. It's important. Give examples of illnesses that the children might have when they are not immunized, and what problems could result because of this lack of immunization. Treatment and complications of measles. Complications that might come because of a child having measles as a disease. Of course, we need to know what is measles and how does it affect children, and what should the treatment be for this child, and what are the complications once a child is on treatment, or once the child has not been treated for the disease of measles. And then we also look at the issue of meningitis. It's clearly defined and clearly explained in your study guides. Please, what are the complications of meningitis? Look into that, and go into detail on how you should tackle this question. And look when we talk about complications, like I said earlier, please base your discussion on the issue of the teaching and learning environment. Remember, our subject is learning and development. How does complications of meningitis affect a child's learning development process? You as a teacher, you are trying to teach this child. You want the child to learn. You want the child to interact with other learners. You want the child to learn from others, and all that. Now, if we have the issue of a child who has complications of meningitis, how do these complications actually affect their learning and their learning development in your classroom? Give examples and look at ways. When we talk about complications, please try also to find ways on how these complications can be resolved. Health indicators. This is just a broad topic, because you can go more into detail on what are the health indicators. I'm going on to chapter 4, self-concept in learners. We know that the teaching process has shifted from the teaching process which we knew in the past, whereby teaching meant the teacher transmitting knowledge from him or herself to the learners. But we know that these days teaching does not only involve the transmission of knowledge from a teacher to a learner, but it's actually a facilitation between the teacher and the learners. The teacher is actually there to facilitate learners learning. Learners learn from doing things for themselves, and the teacher is just there to facilitate how they are learning, and the learners also learn from each other, and the teacher can actually also learn something from the learners through the process of the teaching learning process. So we talk about how do the learners now form positive self-concept during this whole teaching learning process, because it might be a very challenging process for learners to still maintain this positive self-concept when they are not excelling in their subject content. Some learners feel like, how do I maintain a good attitude towards this subject when I always get a 2 out of 20, a 3 out of 20? The teacher is never praising me. I'm forever not getting anything correct. So you as a teacher, you have an obligation to ensure that, regardless of how the learner perform. Excuse me. Let's take a water break here. Okay, let's go back to positive self-concept. Regardless of whether a learner is excelling or having difficulty in your subject, as a teacher, you have an obligation to try to encourage learners to form positive self-concepts for themselves and for the environment and for the subject that you are teaching them. So it's very important that learners have a very positive self-concept of themselves, because it helps them to perform academically well, and it also helps them to grow and continue developing in a desirable manner. So the next point, we will look at the link between self-concept and academic performance. Of course, we know that, like I just mentioned it now, I said self-concept can affect the way a child develops it can affect academic performance. It can affect how they cope with all the challenges that they go through in life. So when they have self concept, in this case we are talking about academic performance, the learners that are so positive and they are encouraged and they are motivated and they know they can do it, they can perform and they can excel in their content subject, and they know that they can try out, they can learn from their mistakes, they can try new things and learn from their mistakes, and they can stay focused. It does really affect them positively academic wise, because they are able to learn from their mistakes and they are able to grab something from their mistakes and move forward and learn more. So that link should be made between self-concept and academic performance. Developing these good characters or morals. Of course, we are talking about self-concept. How do you maintain that these learners in your classroom continue developing these good characters and morals throughout their life, not only in your classroom, even when they leave your classroom one day, they should be able to maintain that these positive characters or good characters that you have helped in forming in them. Then we look at the concept of personality and how it influences self-concept. Personality, that's the character of a person. How does your personality, of course, we know that the learners that come to your classroom are having different personalities. They do not you will have a shy learner in your class, you will have a learner who's outgoing in your class, a reserved learner, a shy learner, and a learner who easily mingles with other learners, and a learner that keeps to themselves in such things. So how does the concept of personality now lead to the influence of self-concept? Of course, we do not expect that learners are all going to we don't expect that learners are going to develop self-concept in the same way, or because of their different personalities that they have. But then it is important that we identify these different personalities and we try to groom them in a positive way according to their different personalities, because each and everyone is able to develop a self-concept regardless of whether they are reserved or they are outspoken characters that they have. And we have chapter 5, I think, which is the longest one here. Let's see if we have chapter 6. Okay, chapter 5 is our last topic. The debate of nature and nature. To nature someone, you are natural like this, or you are natured by your environment. When students are preparing for exams, most of the questions that I get from students is the issue of nature and nature, or nature. I say nature, I don't know how you guys pronounce it, but in any case, when you talk about nature, this is now your inborn abilities. In the nature one, when you say someone you are natured in that manner, it means that these are now your environment. How does the environment influence you as a person? We are talking about the development of a learner, of a child. So the issue, the debate here is that some theorists they argue that how we develop, how we learn, the kind of people that we become, and the kind of our intelligence and our academic abilities is all influenced by what? By the way we are born. For example, some people who argue that his father and his mom were intelligent person, real people, not person, people by nature. So it's obvious that he or she will also naturally be intelligent. So that child should have actually inherited the genetic abilities that the parents had. That's now the issue of nature. You are born with those are your innate abilities. What is in you that can't be changed by anyone. You were born with those abilities. That's the issue of nature. And when we talk about the issue of nature, that is now your environment. This is now, we say, the experiences that you go through as a person are the ones that influence the kind of your learning abilities, your academic achievements are all gonna be influenced by the kind of environment that you went through. Did you go through good teachers? Did you go through a good school, good facilities and such things? That's what's going to determine the kind of academic, your learning abilities at the end of the day. That's the issue of nature. This is your life experiences and what you have gone through, on all these skills that you have gone through. That's the issue of nature. Please, I'm not going to give you an entire answer to the issue of nature and nature. It's just a brief guideline, and of course I need more than just the definition of nature and nature. I want you to go more into detail, not just that is now the natural part, is now the environment. We need to understand how these things differ and give examples. There are many examples you can give from your own experiences, from the experience that you have gone through the learners and through what the books gives you. If your study guide does not give as much explanation on this, please feel free to look up with other educational textbooks. You can go on the internet. We do have a lot of information written about the debate of nature and nature. You are not restricted to only use the study guides when you are preparing for your exams or when you are writing your assignments. You are supposed to actually to go into the library and find books and read more on this, or go on the internet and find more information on any topic that you are given. Now I go on to the psychosocial difficulties, the emotional and the behavioral difficulties, the medical difficulties, and the sensory difficulties, cognitive and learning difficulties, communication difficulties that may cause barriers in learning or in learners' learning. There are many difficulties. I think I've mentioned most of them here. I've mentioned the sensory difficulties, the cognitive difficulties, the learning difficulties, communication difficulties. All these are the type of difficulties that may hinder a learner from learning. So please understand these difficulties, understand how they are. For example, how does a psychosocial difficulty differ from an emotional difficulty? How does a communication difficulty differ from a cognitive difficulty? And how can we actually tackle this kind of difficulty? And how does cognitive difficulty cause barriers in learners' learning? And how does, for example, behavioral difficulties cause a barrier in learners' learning? Human memory stages. Our memory as a human being has got many different stages. Please go through those stages. I will not mention how many there are because you just start writing what I'm mentioning here. It's just for you to actually, it's just a guideline for you to prepare for your exams. So I'm not going to mention all them in how many they are. I know I'm going to receive phone calls about how many stages we have in human memory stages. Even though we have them in the study guides, you are supposed to prepare for the exams on your own with the assistance, of course, of your tutor. The right and left brain. I just put it there, the right and the left brain. Please prepare for your exams well. Read how does the right brain affect learning? How does the left brain affect learning? How do these two things differ, the left and the right brain? That's what you're supposed to know. You remember, like I said, everything that you are discussing is in line with the learning of a learner, the development in the learning of learners. The comparison of the intrinsic barriers and the extrinsic barriers to learning. We've got intrinsic barriers, we've got the extrinsic. Of course, the intrinsic are the inside barriers and the extrinsic are the external barriers that may come across. And we've got the different learning styles. We've got the visual learning style, the auditory learning style, and the kinesthetic learning style. Please study well for this and don't mix them up. Of course, we know visual and auditory are very different. Visual involves your eyes, what you are able to see, and auditory has to do with what you can hear. Of course, don't mix them up. Multiple intelligence by Gartner. Gartner is one theorist who believe that as people we have got different multiple intelligences. There are people who are given, maybe use the word given, who are talented in different fields. Some people are musically talented. There are people who are gifted in numbers, who are actually good at numbers. There are people who are good actually in languages. There are people who are good in movement, who can move, who can dance and such things. Those are different intelligences. So Gartner talks about multiple intelligences, meaning that in your pre-primary grade, in your grade 0, it's very easy for you as a teacher to actually identify a child who has got an intelligence in this and that. You should be able to explain what do we mean by multiple intelligences, how to identify that this learner has got this type of intelligence and this learner has got that type of intelligence. And of course, we are supposed to groom them as a whole, but then of course you should understand what Gardner meant by multiple intelligences as a theory of learning. That is the end of the session. Here I'll just tackle more a bit on general information. Please, you are, like I said earlier at the beginning of my slides, that you are supposed to answer all questions, and please pay attention to the marks allocated per question, so that your answer should be in line with the marks allocated. Usually we don't expect you to write a one paragraph or 4 lines in a question that expects you in a question that carries, for example, 12 marks. That will not be enough for you to score 12 marks. And please do try and attempt to answer each and every question. That's the only way that you can at least score marks, because a tutor will not award you marks for a blank paper which is not answered. Use practical examples. Use local examples in your discussions. Like, I prefer examples that have to do with learning and the learning environment in your classroom. That is all, and please try to be neat in your writing. It just makes it easier for us to mark and assess your papers well. That is the end of my presentation, and I wish you good luck for your May 2018 exams, your August 2018 exams, and your November 2018 exams, and perhaps your supplementary exams for November, late November. But I hope that we all do pass. Thank you very much, and goodbye.